They thought she was just another lost girl who'd wandered onto Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong assumption. What happened next would teach for Navy candidates that underestimating someone based on size and gender is a lesson learned the hard way. When hands wrapped around Petty Officer Second Class, Bryn tore at his throat and slammed her against that concrete wall. Her vision blurred for just a moment. At 26 years old and barely 5'4", she probably looked like an easy target to them. The men in Navy PT gear, all bigger, all confident they could intimidate this small woman in civilian clothes into leaving their space. What they couldn't have known, what they had no way of seeing, was that this woman had spent the last 3 years teaching some of the most elite operators in naval special warfare how to kill with their bare hands. Bryn stood outside Building 7 that morning with fog rolling in thick from the Pacific Ocean, her sea bag slung over one shoulder. Wearing jeans and a hoodie because her temporary assignment orders had come through at the last minute without specifying uniform requirements. She was compact and wiry, her short blonde hair still damp from the morning shower, a scar cutting through her left eyebrow from a training accident during Hell Week that she'd never bothered getting fixed. The building was supposed to house temporary quarters for SEAL candidates rotating through basic underwater demolition training, and according to her orders, she had a bunk assigned there until her permanent instructor quarters opened up. When she pushed through the side door, 4 sets of eyes locked onto her immediately. The silence that followed felt heavy, loaded with assumptions she'd encountered 1,000 times before. A thick-necked petty officer, 3rd class, with a completely shaved head, took a step forward, his expression shifting from surprise to something harder. "You lost." Bryn shook her head calmly. "Actually, I'm assigned here. Temporary berthing until my instructor quarters are ready." The response was immediate laughter. Sharp, dismissive, the kind that says you're not being taken seriously. The petty officer's smile didn't reach his eyes as he spoke again, his voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't for instructors, sweetheart. This is Canada Overflow. Where are you supposed to be?" Bryn Torridge had grown up in Rapid City, South Dakota, the youngest of 3 daughters in a family where toughness wasn't optional. Her father had served 2 tours in Vietnam as a Navy corpsman, coming home with stories he rarely told but lessons he always taught. When Bryn turned 10, he started teaching her how to fight, not because he expected trouble, but because he believed every person deserved the ability to protect themselves when words stopped working. By 15, she was training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at a local gym, entering regional tournaments, racking up more wins than losses against opponents who always underestimated her based on size alone. She enlisted at 18 and went straight into the SEAL support pipeline as a special warfare combatant craft crewman, one of maybe a dozen women in the entire program at that time. For 2 years, she drove rigid-hull inflatable boats in some of the roughest waters imaginable, supporting SEAL operations and learning exactly what real operators looked like when the stakes were highest. When Naval Special Warfare opened close-quarters combat instructor positions to women, Bryn didn't hesitate. She applied immediately and got selected based on her performance record and technical skills. 3 years at the Naval Special Warfare Center followed, teaching hand-to-hand combat, weapons retention, and defensive tactics to SEAL candidates and active duty operators. She held advanced certifications in tactical training methods and became one of only 12 women in the entire Navy qualified to teach lethal close quarters techniques to special warfare personnel. Her promotion to Petty Officer's 2nd class came early, a recognition of exceptional instruction and technical mastery that her superiors couldn't ignore. She didn't talk about her credentials much, because the operators she trained already knew what she could do. They felt it firsthand during demonstrations, when she'd put men twice her size on the mat using nothing but leverage and technique. But outside that tight circle of people who knew her capabilities, assumptions followed her everywhere. People saw a small woman in civilian clothes and made judgments that could turn dangerous fast. Standing in that berthing building, Bryn reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone, opening the email containing her orders and holding the screen up for the petty officer to see. He squinted at it, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion, but not to understanding. Not. Not. He glanced at the screen, then shrugged like it didn't matter what was written there. A taller man with a full sleeve of tattoos running down his left arm stepped forward next, inserting himself between Bryn and the door. "We don't need to verify anything. You're in the wrong place." Bryn kept her voice level, controlled, the way she'd learned to do during countless confrontations where staying calm was the only way to maintain authority. "You can check with the personnel office if you want. My orders are legitimate. I'm supposed to be here." A third man, younger and clearly uncomfortable with how this was escalating, glanced between the petty officer and Bryn with uncertainty written across his face. "Maybe we should just let her stay. It's really not that big a deal." The petty officer turned on him instantly, his voice sharp with authority that only exists in small hierarchies. "Shut up, Morgan. This is candidate birthing, and I'm not sharing space with some random girl who wandered in here thinking she belongs." Bryn's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm, to give them one more chance to back down before this went somewhere nobody wanted it to go. "I'm not a random girl. I'm a petty officer second class, and I have orders assigning me to this building. If you have an issue with that, take it up with your chain of command." His expression shifting from amusement to confusion, but not to understanding, not to respect. He glanced at the screen, then shrugged like it didn't matter what was written there. A taller man with a full sleeve of tattoos running down his left arm stepped forward next, inserting himself between Bryn and the door. "We don't need to verify anything. You're in the wrong place." Bryn kept her voice level, controlled, the way she'd learned to do during countless confrontations where staying calm was the only way to maintain authority. "You can check with the personnel office if you want. My orders are legitimate. I'm supposed to be here." A third man, younger and clearly uncomfortable with how this was escalating, glanced between the petty officer and Bryn with uncertainty written across his face. "Maybe we should just let her stay. It's really not that big a deal." The petty officer turned on him instantly, his voice sharp with authority that only exists in small hierarchies. "Shut up, Morgan. This is candidate birthing, and I'm not sharing space with some random girl who wandered in here thinking she belongs." Bryn's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm, to give them one more chance to back down before this went somewhere nobody wanted it to go. "I'm not a random girl. I'm a petty officer, second class, and I have orders assigning me to this building. If you have an issue with that, take it up with your chain of command." The fourth man had been silent until that moment. He stepped closer now, easily, over 6 feet tall with shoulders. It seemed to fill the entire doorway. His voice was low, threatening in a way that made it clear he was done talking. "Petty officer or not, you're not staying here. And if you don't leave on your own, we'll help you out." Bryn looked at each of them in turn, reading the situation with the same clarity she'd developed through years of high-stress training and real-world operations. They weren't going to listen. They weren't going to check her orders or verify anything with personnel. They saw an intruder, and they were preparing to remove her by force if she didn't comply immediately. The reassignment orders had been rushed through the system, and the administrative copy hadn't reached the personnel office yet. That gave them just enough plausible deniability to justify their hostility in their own minds. The petty officer stepped forward until he was close enough that Bryn could smell the sweat on his shirt, could see the certainty in his eyes that she would back down. Last chance. "Get out." Bryn stood there for what felt like a long time, her pulse steady, her breathing controlled, despite the adrenaline beginning to move through her system. She'd been in situations like this before, though never exactly like this. Men who underestimated her capabilities based on appearance alone. Men who believed that size and aggression were the only things that mattered in a physical confrontation. Men who learned the hard way that assumptions could be painful teachers. She thought about her father, the way he used to tell her that the best fight was always the one you avoided. "Walk away when you can," he'd said more than once. But when you can't walk away, make absolutely certain they remember the encounter. She thought about Hell Week, the brutal night they'd done, surf torture in water so cold it felt like knives against bare skin. She'd outlasted candidates twice her size that night because she understood something fundamental. Pain was temporary, but quitting was permanent. She thought about the Naval Special Warfare Center, the countless classes where she'd demonstrated joint locks and chokes on SEAL operators who had weighed her by 80 pounds or more, showing them how proper leverage and technique could overcome raw strength every single time. None of that mattered here, not yet. Not until it had to. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with tension that everyone could feel. The petty officer was still standing too close, his jaw set, waiting for her to back down like he expected. The big man behind him had his arms crossed, physically blocking the door. Morgan looked like he wanted to say something else, but didn't have the courage. The tattooed man just watched, with an expression that gave nothing away. Bryn picked up her sea bag slowly, deliberately. Fine. I'll go. She turned toward the door, and that's when everything changed. The petty officer grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around hard. Wrong place, he said, and his hands went straight to her throat. The shove came immediately after, slamming her back against the concrete wall with enough force to make stars burst behind her eyes. Her head hit the surface hard, and for one split second, her vision blurred and her ears rang with the impact. She felt his fingers digging into her neck, cutting off air, and she heard the others laughing like this was some kind of entertainment. Bryn didn't think. She reacted with muscle memory built through thousands of hours of training. Her right hand came up fast, hooking around his wrist and twisting hard in the exact motion that breaks grip strength. At the same time, her left hand drove upward into the soft tissue just below his jawline. Not a lethal strike, but sharp enough and precise enough to make him gag and stumble backward immediately. She followed with a knee to his solar plexus that doubled him over and sent him gasping to the floor. All the air driven from his lungs in one explosive moment. The big man moved next, faster than she'd expected for someone his size. He lunged at her, trying to grab both her arms to restrain her, but she sidestepped and used his own momentum against him exactly the way she'd taught hundreds of students. She hooked her leg behind his knee while driving her shoulder into his chest, and he went down hard. His head hit the tile floor with a dull thud that left him groaning and disoriented, stars swimming in his vision. The tattooed man hesitated, his eyes going wide as he processed what he was seeing. Bryn didn't give him time to make a decision. She stepped forward, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it into a standing arm lock that forced him to his knees immediately. The pain was instant and undeniable. He yelped, and she held him there with controlled pressure, her voice cold and absolutely steady. "You want to keep going?" He shook his head frantically, his face pale with pain and realization. No, we're done. We're done." Morgan had already backed up against the far wall, his hands raised in surrender. "Primera, didn't touch you. Primera. Sí. Ere primera, didn't touch you." Bryn released the tattooed man and stepped back, her breathing still controlled and steady despite what had just happened. The petty officer was on the floor, clutching his throat and wheezing as he tried to get air back into his lungs. The big man groaned and rolled onto his side, blinking hard as he tried to clear his head. The door burst open suddenly, and a senior chief in khaki uniform strode in with his face twisted in fury. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "What the hell is going on here?" The petty officer tried to stand, still clutching his throat, his voice coming out raspy and desperate. "She attacked us, Senior Chief." "We were just," the senior chief cut him off immediately. "Shut your mouth, Davis." He looked at Bryn, his expression hard and unreadable. "Who are you?" "Petty Officer Second Class Bryn Torridge. I was assigned temporary berthing in this building. These men refused to let me stay, and then they physically assaulted me." The senior chief's eyes narrowed. "Show me your orders." Bryn pulled out her phone and handed it to him without hesitation. He read the screen carefully, his jaw tightening with every line. Then he looked at the 4 men scattered around the room in various states of pain and defeat. "You idiots just assaulted a naval special warfare close-quarters combat instructor." He keyed his radio immediately, his voice sharp with authority. "Master at Arms. Senior Chief Ruiz, I need security and medical to Building 7 candidate berthing right now. We have an assault on a petty officer and multiple injuries." He pointed at Davis, his fingers shaking slightly with controlled anger. "You and your buddies are going to explain to the commanding officer exactly why you put hands on an instructor. UCMJ Articum 128. Assault on a petty officer. That's masked, reduction in rank, and possible court." He turned back to Bryn, and his expression softened just slightly. "Do you need medical attention?" My head hit the wall, Senior Chief. "I should probably get checked out." "Smart call. Medics are on the way." He glared at the others again. "Nobody moves until the MAs get here. You're all being detained, pending investigation." They stayed frozen where they were. The senior chief's expression shifted as he looked back at Bryn. "You handled that well, petty officer." Most people would have panicked. Bryn shrugged slightly. "I didn't want to hurt them, but they didn't give me a choice." 2 days later, Bryn moved into her permanent instructor quarters on the other side of the base, in a building that actually matched her assignment. Davis and the big man received Captain S. Mast under UCMJ Article 128. For assault on a petty officer, both were reduced to E3, given 45 days restriction and 45 days extra duty, then reassigned to fleet support commands, pending further investigation into their conduct. The tattooed man received non-judicial punishment and mandatory professional conduct training. Morgan, who hadn't participated in the actual assault, was required to provide a sworn statement and complete additional leadership training that included a formal presentation to his peers about the critical importance of intervening when witnessing misconduct. Word spread fast through the tight-knit community at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. By the end of the week, everyone at the Naval Special Warfare Center knew what had happened. How a female instructor had been attacked by 4 candidates and walked away with nothing more than a concussion, while they ended up facing serious disciplinary action that would follow them for the rest of their careers. Some people were skeptical at first, questioning whether the story had been exaggerated. But when they found out she was a certified close-quarters combat instructor who taught active-duty SEALs, the skepticism turned to respect. Bryn didn't talk about the incident. She reported to her new assignment as a lead instructor for advanced defensive tactics and got immediately to work. The candidates she trained were professional, focused, and genuinely eager to learn from someone with her level of expertise. A few had heard the story and asked if it was true. She confirmed it without elaborating or adding details, then moved on to the lesson plan because the past was the past, and the work mattered more than reputation. One afternoon a few weeks later, she saw Morgan outside the training building. He approached slowly, his expression serious and uncertain. "Petty officer, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have spoken up. I should have stopped them." Bryn looked at him for a long moment, weighing his sincerity, then nodded once. "You're right. You should have. Next time, be the one who does the right thing before it escalates. That's what real leaders do." He nodded and walked away, and Bryn went back inside. There were more classes to teach, more candidates to train, and more lessons to pass on about what it really means to be an operator in a world that still judges you by appearance first and capability second.